Oh, hi. Are you here for the fun question? Me too. The Fun Question, a show where we explore the strange and powerful ways people engage in a life of fun. I'm your host, Dr. David Thomas, the professor of fun, coming to you from my hidden lair and back for another week of playful exploration. My guest today is Dan Hamann, songwriter, composer, performer, and musical appreciator. Now, Dan's someone I've known a long time, since high school, really. And in college, we even had a musical comedy act, the late, great Happy Dancing Boots. Now, something I want you to know about Dan is I've never known Dan to be a music snob, although I think he loves music as much as anyone I ever met. And I kind of think that he has almost like an Anthony Bourdain appreciation of music, the way that Bourdain appreciates food. Yeah, I think Dan knows the difference between good and bad. He knows complexity and simplicity, and he can appreciate both virtuosity as well as soul. But like Bourdain, he gets to the heart of the matter, and I think Dan channels his deep knowledge and love of music into a true appreciation for what it takes to be a musician, to learn how to express your ideas musically, and then certainly how to share those ideas with others. Now, in addition to writing, composing, and performing music, Dan's now experimenting with new ways to share his appreciation of music, something he calls Between the Notes, an Attunement Night. What is it? How does it work? And will it be any fun? We're about to find out. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for being on the show here.
Hello, Professor of Fun. How are you?
Yes. Now, you're going to tell me all about your views on music and why it's fun, but let's start with this Beyond the Notes, Between the Notes Attunement Night. What's an attunement night? How'd you get there, and why should anyone care?
I think to talk about what it is, I do have to go a little back in time.
Great.
I was lucky enough, my wife and I were lucky enough to go to Portugal. This is probably 7 or 8 years ago. And we went to a place called a Fado House. I had read about them ahead of time, so I was excited to go. And Fado is a kind of music. It's a folk music that's really comes from the history of Portugal and so forth. But the Fado House is where it's performed. And when we walked in there, we're obviously not locals. You know, my wife and I come from the States. And the place is full. It's a small place, but it's full. And the owner comes up to us and says, "Look, I'm really glad you're here. But you got to understand something. If you guys talk during the music, all these people are going to kick you out of here." He's not even saying himself. He's like, "These people are going to physically remove you." And I already knew this, so I was like, fantastic. I've never been more into anything in my life. But it was a really cool experience because, you know, this place maybe seats 40 people. And you got to understand that it's progressive. So you order drinks, you have food. We were there with a couple other friends. We were talking and laughing like people do when they go out. And about every half hour, the lights go down. The waiters will not come out. People put their silverware down. People will not come in the front door if they hear the music playing. And so for 15 minutes, it's a communal experience, creating an environment together for music to really, that kind of intimate sounding music to really thrive. And then they do 3 songs, the lights go back up, you order more wine, you keep talking. And my wife and I stayed from like 5 p.m. to 3 in the morning. You know, we love the whole thing. But it's also people come and go. They may just have a couple drinks, listen to a couple sets, go. People who are waiting outside will replace them. And it's just a really cool, festive, fun environment. And it really made me think it's hard to hear that kind of, those kind of sound waves in, I think, the modern era. You know, pre-amplification, there used to be, was music unless you had a big band or something like that. There was a lot more, I think, music that kind of played with those more intimate sound waves. And it was just really fun to hear them. And I wanted to kind of jump off of that and maybe do some more of that myself. So what an attunement night is really trying to replicate that experience. You know, we don't play Fado. You can play any kind of music. But to have this sort of progressive where everyone's in on it. Everyone's sort of part of the band to create the soundscape for that kind of thing to exist. And so this will be the 5th one I've produced. This one I'm working with a winery to try and pair the spirit of the music with the spirit of the wines. We'll see how that goes. But that's what an Attunement Night is and kind of where it comes from.
Great. So let me get this straight. So basically it's 30 minutes of kind of normal restaurant activity and then pause for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, intentionally listen to music, and then back to what you were doing.
That's right. Rinse and repeat all night long.
And why do you think that works? I mean, why? I mean, it seems a very un-American thing to do to actually pay attention to something. I'm just wondering.
I think it works for a couple of reasons. I think there's a real sense of community there. When everyone's kind of part of the band when that's happening, they're all helping make this happen. I also think that, this gets into why people like music or why music is fun. Sounds like not a bad topic for your podcast. Yeah. I think that in the modern era, and I love amplified music. We all love amplified music. This is not a better, worse than sort of thing. It's just rare to hear that. I think unless it's maybe some more scholarly music like classical or jazz, there's places that I think quietness is part of the expectation. But I think if it's not that, it's now a bar, which can be a blast, but you're there. You go there to talk with your friends. More power to you. Have a drink with your friends. That's a great thing to do. But the music is to create energy in the room, or maybe a dance and you shout over it and it's a great time. But I think to hear non-scholarly music, and I say that non-judgmentally, but non-scholarly music in that environment is really hard to find. And so I think it's really fun to hear it. And I think you get into a little bit of why music appeals to us. And we talk about, there's this whole language that's out there, this whole palette of emotion that we don't get to hear too much because we deal with volume so much.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. It seems that there's not a lot of formats where you're asked to listen to music intently, but for a very short period of time. Even if you go to a symphony, I mean, it might be an hour and a half, 2 hours, and
yeah,
it's wonderful, but there's something missing where you still have to wait 2 hours before you can talk about it. What's it like to actually really tune into a couple of songs and then be able to chat about it?
It's really fun. I think long form music like a symphony, which again I love. This is not a judgment call. It's like going to see a movie. You're there to absorb this story from beginning, middle to end. But there's a lot of folk and pop and rock and tango and all this stuff that are short form music. It's 3-4 minutes long. And the cool thing is that, in a concert, it's hard to actually talk about what you just saw because that time doesn't exist. Whereas it's like you might just do 3 songs at an Attunement Night and then the lights come back up and everyone gets a chance to it's like you give people something to talk about while they're out to talk to their friends, right?
Yeah. And what is the audience reaction? You said this will be your 5th one. Are you getting repeat customers? I mean, why do people come?
Yeah. I mean, it started mostly with friends and family. You've been to one, as well. Yeah. The response has been really. People really like it. That was my response when I went to the Fado House. This is really that style of music. My response was that as well. I think if you back up a little and talk about, what music is and why it feels different, it's less necessarily the ability to talk afterwards, which is, of course, really fun. But, I think why is music fun at all? Mm-hmm. I've heard there's a lot of theories, but the one I love the most is it goes way back. It's a form of communication. If you talk about words and you say happy, okay, we probably have 40 words that kind of mean different types of happiness. They could be a playful happiness like gleeful or a tickled. There could be something that's like excited, like elated and exhilarated. And all these things have really specific meanings of types of happy. What I believe is that the reason we can tell the difference is not because of the words we say. It's because of the tone and the timbre and the cadence that we say it. And that there's actually not 40, there's infinity types of this happiness. And so what happens is when you can only hear volume, music that needs volume to do what it does, not a judgment, but you start to lose the ability to have some of those specificities because the volume itself creates echoes and feedback and decay in the room, which is cool. But it means you can't really play staccato very well. You can't do different larger crescendos because you're starting at 6 and going to 10. And so there's some of these specificities of emotional response you get to play with kind of disappear. And so it's nice to have that palette, I think, be available to that emotional palette to play with.
Right. And something that I enjoyed when I went to the Attunement Night that I went to was that I think that there's you feel this pressure of like, oh no, I have to listen, like this is going to be good for me, like this is going to be complex music that I really have to appreciate. But instead, I found it to be the opposite. I found whether it was a solo guitar player or a whole band, it just gave you the mental space to actually take it all in. And I kind of wonder too if there's just something to be said for that. That the time between the music allows you to take the music in more on face value. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't think it was about a specific genre. I mean, I'm curious with the between the notes what styles will be there, but it's really not about a specific musical genre, is it?
It's not, it's not. It's about not having to play with volume because of the venue in the talking in the room. It's really about that. And I think that the talking between is just a great way to do it. But boy, any genre, I think sometimes think it's going to be, it's going to be this really introspective music. No, you can do something funny. It's just about create a communal experience where we all really are absorbing what this song is together.
Yeah, I mean, back to the food analogy, it almost seems to me this is a little bit of the fun or the joy of going to a fancy restaurant and being served courses where they don't come out all at the same time and you eat one thing at a time and you really enjoy it versus going to family style buffet where they just load the table up with everything and you mix and match and there's kind of a chaos to it.
Yeah. Actually, that's really true. And that's part of why with this next one, I'm partnering with a winery. We are saying the first one is a light wine, and we're going to play kind of light, easy, digestible songs. And then there's going to be smoother. We're going to try and play a smoother set. And then we're going to do a complex set at the end with like a cab. I don't know whether it'll work, but it's going to be kind of a fun thing to try.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm curious because I think, one way of me looking at Attunement Nights is there's a theater to it that I think sometimes we miss in musical performance. I'm just going to say, pick the average kind of touring band. They kind of have a set, right? Like you kind of know how it's going to go, when they're going to play the hits. They're going to do one or two encores. And again, no judgment against that, but it's a little bit vaudeville. And I feel like with your Attunement Night, you're trying to draw out an experience in people that's about the music, but is bigger than the music. Do you feel like that there is kind of a theatrical component to this?
Definitely. When we went to the Fado House, the woman who sang was fabulous. She was probably, I don't know, in her mid 60s, maybe pushing 70, has been singing Fado her whole life. Yeah. And Fado is a dramatic genre of music. And again, Attunement Night doesn't have to be that, but she had a boa that when she came out, she'd flip it around her neck, and then she'd do these songs about sending men off to the sea, So it definitely had this sort of theatrical moment. That said, anytime you're in front of people on purpose, it's a bit of theater. You got to accept that there's a little bit of a stage. And so I like to lean into that a little bit.
Yeah. And, I mentioned that we were in a comedy act together. So I've always known, Dan, the musician, who also knew how to lean into a moment. And, a moment could be a punchline, but I think the moment could be something else. So I'd like to kind of turn and expand beyond the Attunement Night and talk a little bit about the album that you did, Lumbering Grace. And I want to talk about that as another example, I think, of you making music into an experience more than just a collection of songs. So roll back the tape. It's the middle of COVID. Why did you decide to make a record, and how'd you go about doing it?
Part of it was COVID. As you know, I've been writing I'll call them novelty songs for a very long time with you all the way back in the late 80s and on through my life. And, part of it was just COVID. I was pretty quarantined during COVID. And part of it was just something to do, to be creative. And part of it was also just the right time. I mean, all these fabulous musicians worldwide were not gigging. And so I could easily send files back and forth to some people who maybe wouldn't have the time for me otherwise to play virtuosic, I don't know what the words with the adjective, virtuosically with their instrument on my album. So it was a really fun time to do that. It was also nice because I've been writing stuff like that for 20 years. And it was nice to say, well, here's the top 12. It was kind of like I knew which one were the bangers because I was able to kind of know from audience reactions which one to maybe orchestrate and really do up.
And so you just emailed musicians internationally and asked them if they'd play on your record, or?
Yeah. There's I can't remember the exact numbers. I used to have it on my fingertips, but there's something like 36 musicians from 26 countries on the album. And I really wanted to have this sort of orchestral feel to it. I thought the dichotomy between the fact that the songs are supposed to be funny, but then this whole like, you know, oboes and bassoons and flutes and all this stuff all over, I thought would be kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think you had access to, like, serious chamber musicians and symphonic orchestra players and people that really
Yeah,
did this for a living,
yeah.
playing a part on your funny songs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you could still do that today, but I think it'd be a lot more expensive than it was during COVID because some of their revenue stream was gone. So there was a little bit of they had the time and the willingness to really do that at the time. So it also was sort of a fortuitous moment in time. I hate to say that about a global pandemic, but for me, making the album is maybe a fortuitous moment in time as well.
But it seems to me that there was a little bit of play involved there for yourself. I mean, like you say, it was COVID, so there were some constraints. But you live in Seattle. There's plenty of talented musicians. You could hire people locally, but
Yeah.
there must have been something about exploring the entire world and hiring people that maybe
Oh,
never
it
even
was
occurred
so
to
fun.
them to play on a funny song.
David, it was so fun. I mean, my wife describes it as, I'd send the file away, what I had of the song, and I described what I wanted and where to put it. And then maybe a week would go by and I'd get a file back. And then I was able to drop it into the song and hear what they did. And my wife says it was like Christmas morning every time I got a file back. It was like, it's like, oh, I got this thing. I'll give you an example. There's this song on it, Blue, which has tons of musicians on it. And the idea is there's all these colors of blue, and each time a new blue color is introduced, it's personified by a new instrument. So I need a lot of instruments. And so one of them I wanted an organ.
Hmm.
And I played it on my synthesizer. I'm like, you know what? This is like the only thing on this album that's like synthesized. So I did some research and I found a guy in Serbia who has access to recording equipment, which is the hard part,
Yeah.
to record it well, and an actual pipe organ in an actual cathedral. So you wouldn't know it listening to it. When that comes in, it's actually being played in a cathedral in Serbia by a guy. And to me, that's just funny. I mean, there's something funny about why go through all that, but it's real. It's a real thing in there.
Yeah. Now, well, I'll put links to the album in there, but I mean, it's a very funny record, but the music's great. I mean, song about the dog that barks at everything. My favorite, "This Shirt Don't Feel Right" or "Spider Bridges." Everybody needs to just check some of these songs out. That's really
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
I'm curious though. I think that we have a kind of common feeling sometimes that like serious musical virtuosity comes at the expense of that kind of just joy, or kind of the playfulness of it. And I know you don't see it that way, but can you break that down? How does it that we get to the fact that real music has to be serious and played with great technique, and fun music is just dumb rock and roll and doesn't mean anything? How do we get there, and how come you haven't fallen into that trap?
I don't know. I guess I don't know if I feel like that's more than other art forms, maybe. I don't know. But music serves so many purposes. It's so many things. It can be just to make you dance. It can be to be introspective. It could be for religious purposes. It could be lullabies. It serves so. It's just organized sound waves that are at our disposal to use. And so, I don't really draw a big line between it. I think some stuff is cool and great because it's just makes you want to move or sing along. And some stuff is cool or great because it revels in its own complexity. But that's not a value statement. That's just an isness. I do think it's harder to talk about music with your friends. My wife and I like to go to museums.
Hmm.
And if there's a piece of art, we're often in the same room and not necessarily standing next together. But one of us can grab the other and say, hey, I want to show you something that looks really cool. And you go over there and you look at it and you say, look at how he did those brush strokes, or look at how the painting goes around the edge of the frame. And you can kind of discuss it.
Hmm.
Music exists in the dimension of time. It exists in time. And it also, the moment that you're liking because it's being echoed from before, or it's surprising you because you thought it was going to echo before, or it's the end of a crescendo, or it's part of a phrase. It exists in time. So it's really hard to have those discussions like you would in a museum when you show someone else, what it is that you liked, because it's not that thing, it's the whole thing that allowed that moment to happen. And so it's just harder to kind of discuss that. And I also think that some, like say visual art, not all of it, there's so many different kinds, and there's no value judgment here as well, but I think that some of it, you are reveling in its complexity, right? You're saying that's made with a pen and paper. Yeah. How is that even possible, right? Yeah. And I think that since a lot of people don't play an instrument, which is also fine, that sometimes the virtuosity is about how with what ease they're able to make it sound. You know what I mean? And yeah, you can shred, and that can be really cool too, and people love that. But sometimes, boy, it's almost invisible because they're so good. And that makes it harder to kind of pinpoint that moment in time and say, look how good they are, unless you play yourself. A lot of musicians will say shredding is a parlor trick, playing slow and pretty is hard. And so there's a little bit of kind of, I think it's harder to hear necessarily if you're a person who doesn't play.
Yeah. I like your observation that there's something inherently time-based about music in terms of its appreciation and just the experience of it. Maybe that's why, it's so easy to have fandoms and, be at a Taylor Swift concert and scream along the lyrics with everybody else. Is musically, maybe it's not the best environment, but it's that participation in the music. Yeah. It's different than sitting in a jazz club where people, snap their fingers to kind of be quiet, to show appreciation. Yeah. And I wonder too, I think about just, the inherent fun of music. I know it's kind of come and gone, but the game Guitar Hero, I think, did this great job of tying play to music, and not just playing the mechanics of it, but the actual playfulness in music, because it allowed you to act as if you were playing these songs. And, it really was interesting, but it's a time-based game. And for me, at least, I think it made me appreciate some songs I never appreciated until I was like actually riffing along on these buttons and going, oh, that's pretty cool. That's like pretty cool.
I think maybe that might be true. I didn't play it, but I know people who have said it's the first time they really listened to the fact that there's different parts. They listen to it as a whole, but they're like, oh, I can now hear the bass versus the rhythm guitar versus the other instruments. And I think that's kind of cool, and it is fun. Playing music is fun. Making noise. I wish anyone who, there's a saying I don't believe in, but that I like. It's that the worst thing that happened to music was musicians. I don't believe that, but I think the idea in that is you're not worthy, you're not good enough to play, right. And that's not good for play. Man, if you know two chords, and you find someone who's willing to hit a drum with some sticks, you should go in your garage and make some noise because it's a blast.
Yeah. My friend Mike, he's a musician and has been in many bands, and he said that the worst thing that happened to music was recording. He said before that, everybody had instruments in their house, everybody played something, and you didn't listen to recorded music. It didn't exist. You sat around and played music.
Yeah. I do think we've lost something there. And I don't know if it's the worst thing because I have thousands of recorded songs and I'm glad to have them, and I've recorded some myself. But I know what he means. It's like you with progress, you gain and lose things all the time. We did gain the ability to hear incredible musicians in our home. I sometimes lament, I wish I could have heard some of these musicians that I've never heard of. We can still look at Van Gogh's painting. We can still look at Rembrandt. Yeah. I don't know who was the greatest flautist in the world. He probably was before recorded music. I would have loved to have heard that. So there's a little give and take there. But people did used to learn their three chords, and you get together and play and sing, and it wasn't about are you good enough. It's that it's really fun to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's hone in on that for the rest of this conversation. This is the fun question. We're always asking why things are fun. And I want to start with that weird use of the word play. Because if I say play the guitar, that sounds different than play with a stick.
Yeah.
Are they different? Is it the same word? I mean, what's the relationship? What does it mean to play an instrument
It's
versus
an interesting
play
question
with a
because we
ball?
don't say we execute the instrument. We don't say we, administer the instrument. We play the guitar, we play the piano, we play the oboe. And I think it's the right word. I mean, at the end of the day, it is really fun to manipulate this thing and have it serve to be able to play with this emotional tapestry that's huge and specific. There is a sense of play to me for that, at least for me, and so it's interesting that that's the verb that's been attached to it, and I think it's actually apropos.
Do you think that part of it is just that people don't see it as play because there is some basic technical proficiency? Even drums. I mean, I think people think that you can just hit on something and it's percussion. It is.
Yeah.
But if you learn a few things, man, it's so much more
I
interesting.
wouldn't say even drums. I suck at drums, so I'm like just in awe of people. I'm in this band called All's Well. This guy named John plays so great. I'm like, man, it's such an asset. It's a.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at that, and so I guess there is a part of it that is play though. To be able to do that, the technical stuff, we try and make it heady, but it's much more like if you are walking down the street and you see a bunch of kids with 3 jump ropes going 2 directions of all these different, and they're doing cartwheels through them and tagging each other and switching places and dancing and chanting, and it blows your mind. The reason why they can do that is because of how much they failed, in that they did it enough that you don't have to think about it anymore. And there's part of playing an instrument, you have to think it's fun to do something. I do. I don't know why. Even when I was just learning guitar for the first time, learning the basic chords, that took hours and hours of just doing them over and over again. I know you do the same. You play the basic chords on the guitar too. And we forget going through that, but it was kind of fun to do it. And I don't care how good you are. There's a part of you playing your instrument that's just the enjoyment of that incremental progress of doing the same thing over and over till your left hand will do it while your right hand's making dinner. That has to feel kind of fun to you. And so I think there's just part of playing an instrument that comes down to that's fun for some people, and for some people that just feels like work.
Yeah, and fair enough. I mean, I guess I would say, people say I ski for fun, but you wouldn't say getting better at skiing made it less fun. In fact, the physical mastery of that sport probably gives you more room to do different things and enjoy it in different ways. And maybe
Yeah.
it's the same in music. Maybe it's like, yeah, it's going to be hard to learn to play a clarinet. That's going to take a while.
Yeah.
But if you can learn some basic chords on a keyboard, that could be very enjoyable. It's really great is actually to know enough to be able to just play things.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess what I'm saying is I think some people think that journey is the fun part. Like the actual sitting, like I don't dread thinking, okay, I'm going to try and get better at this aspect of my playing. So I'm going to come into my music room and just do that for an hour every day for the next X number of weeks. To me, there's something meditative and pleasurable about that. And I think for some people it isn't.
Well, I wonder if that's part of it too, is if music is one of those things that falls into that line where music can be all encompassing and can be beautiful. I mean, like you say, an organ in a cathedral can be, supernatural. It could be like you're connecting to, to the heavens. And play we usually think of as being a lot more frothy and contingent and laughter inducing. And I wonder if is music just stuck because it can support both of those worlds and just effortlessly moves back and forth?
What do you mean by stuck?
Well, I think that people think about music sometimes as more serious, even though they enjoy it in their daily life. And I think that's why in this day and age, jazz is less popular than it's been, orchestral music is less popular than it's been. And I don't think that's the defect in the music. I think it may just be our understanding of how that's fun.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I mean, certainly it's not that music is unpopular. I mean, man, it sells out massive stadiums and people wear T-shirts with we love our favorite artists, whoever our favorite musical artists are. We love them, and so it's not that it's unpopular. It's super popular. But, when something what makes it cool no judgment. But what makes it cool is a bit of scholarly understanding and complexity.
Mhm.
I just don't know how many. There's a certain. It's the kind of person who would think it's fun to do a Sudoku puzzle every morning,
Yeah.
and not everyone is that person. Some people think that sounds great. Some people feel like, why would I do that to myself? And so I think it's a little more just kind of general aptitude than people should appreciate it. I don't know if that's exactly what you're saying, but there's that famous experiment where one of the greatest violinists in the world, Joshua Bell, played a $3 million Stradivarius, and he played some of the best classical music of all time, and he did it on a subway platform to see if people would stop and listen.
Yeah.
And most people didn't. And it always kind of ticked me off that some people's hypothesis is that we don't stop to appreciate beauty. Yeah. And I'm like, they're going to work. Leave them alone. There's context to this stuff too. And you do need to really appreciate, I think, complex music to really be willing to settle in. We don't want to watch Citizen Kane every night. We also want to watch a Will Ferrell movie. It's like, and so it's just you got to be ready for it and plan for it to really kind of absorb it, I think.
I think that brings us all the way back around, and I think it makes sense in terms of what the Attunement Night does. It's a structure that allows people to play with their understanding and appreciation of music without being told what it is, without having to lock into a genre, of being able to have other people around and make it social. I think it's great. I mean, I think that really at the end of the day, what I hear you is that there's something fundamentally beautiful about and wonderful about music, but that it's really in the activity of making and consuming and listening to and enjoying music that it really becomes fun.
Yeah, and I think that the is not you talked about in episode 0 comes to play here. It's powerful, specific emotions, and you get to feel what it's like to be, let's say, Romeo and Juliet. To love so much you're willing to poison yourself rather than live without. Henry Mancini and Tchaikovsky took a stab at Romeo and Juliet and did a great job. But at the end of the day, it's not real. But you get to make me feel this almost cartoon emotion, or you're with the Star Wars resistance. What's it like to go to war against the stormtroopers? It's like, what does that feel like to give your life? And it's like, you get to play with all of that. So at the end of the day, there is a play element to all music. You're playing with these emotional contexts.
Well, that's great. Well, we'll wrap that up here, and now it's time for the lightning round. So I got a few questions for you. You got like one sentence to answer each of these. See how you do.
Boy, the pressure's on. Okay.
Okay, ready? What is the world's most underappreciated musical pleasure?
Underappreciated musical pleasure. Very late career Paul McCartney.
Okay, there you go.
He's as good as he ever was at 80 years old. I don't care what anyone says.
All right, there you go. Okay, a musical genre that you would defend more than most people.
Oh, that's easy. Lawrence Welk. Lawrence Welk. Can I say ASS on your podcast? Is that too big of a swear word? He kicks ass. Yeah. I don't care what anyone's. I have a real high tolerance for cheese. And to me, it's just an emotional place to go live. But the musicianship is astronomical, and I love him to death.
Okay, I love that. And then I guess I'll ask you this, the final one. Instrument that you irrationally love.
Oh, man, that's irrationally love. I tend to love them all. Yeah. So, to me, they're like color palettes. So it's a little hard to say, like, I would irrationally like orange. It's like, it's just they're colors and contextuals. But I probably when someone's playing something really kind of weird and bizarre and old, like just to see what it sounds like an old bone flute or something that, would be like they made 40,000 years ago, just because, I don't know, there's something cool about hearing what that would have been like. But I don't have a real good answer for that one. I'm going to bring this episode down with a thud with not a good answer. How about that?
All right, then here, I'll give you one extra. What song makes you laugh every time you hear it?
Let's go with laugh every time I hear it. I'm going to have to say Lawrence Welk's version of "Linger a While."
Okay.
There is an organ solo in that there's no words. The organ solo makes me laugh every time.
That's saying something. A playful, laughable organ solo. All
Yes.
right. Well, thanks, Dan. Can't wait to hear the next Attunement Night. I'll be there.
Thank you, Professor Fun. I'll see you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
So, what makes music fun? Well, it turns out that playing music or playing are all the same thing. They seem to me to be instances of where the technical mastery becomes a doorway into a kind of self-expression and meaning making, that sometimes we confuse the technique with the outcome. So we confuse being able to play the guitar with playing the guitar, when in fact you can play the guitar poorly or well, but you're still playing. Um, Kind of in the example I use, I think that, learning to be a better skier doesn't make skiing less playful. It probably makes it more playful. I also think that maybe one of the underlying aspects of why we don't necessarily always think of music as fun, although certainly we do, is I think that there is the tradition of music being so associated with the beauty aesthetic and being so associated with the supplication to the power of the divine. You think about Gregorian chants or organ music in a cathedral. Really, it's there to make you feel small in the presence of God. And there's that sense of beauty always being telling you who to be. Or as I like to joke, if you don't get opera, it's your fault, not opera's fault. Opera's great. You just aren't smart enough or sophisticated enough to understand opera. But of course, music isn't just complex, beautiful music. Music can be silly novelty songs or punk rock. It can be moving folk music or passionate blues music. It can be intricate jazz music, or it can be soaring opera. It could be really anything. And I think this conversation with Dan really points to just the playful heart of music, not so much as plunking out notes on an instrument, but what those notes say and what they speak and where they take you in that moment in time. And it really does take you away. It takes you into an ambiguous place of meaning making where you get to fill your mind with images, or you get to scream along with lyrics with your friends, or you get to do the Slayer hand at Slayer, whatever it is. So what makes music fun? Well, in the spirit of what I think of as fun, music is in the ears, the experience of the person experiencing it. Music is fun because you don't just play music, but you play when you listen to music. You play when you dance. You're at play inside of the structures of music. And maybe at the end of the day, that's what makes music so wonderful, is that in the scientific constructions of how sound waves work, human beings have found this amazing ability to express, to feel, to move, to explore, and to think. And hey, let's just say music is fun. Thanks again to Dan. And I should point out, not only is he a great musician, he composed the musical tracks for this show. So thanks to Dan for the intro and outro music. They're fun, and I appreciate it. And maybe one day we'll have Dan back on to play us some more music.